Today, I am doing a live stream on Twitch, which I'll upload at a later date onto YouTube. So, if at any point I'm kind of like randomly talking to people, that means that they're in the live chat, and I won't be able to pause the camera for the drying off with the blow dryer. However, this allows me to put a little bit more extra time and patience into a painting, mainly due to the fact that my camera will stop filming after 27 minutes, 28 minutes on my cell phone. I use the Samsung Galaxy SG8. So if anybody knows how I can correct that, let me know, because that would be beneficial. All right. So that being said, in front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, 140 pound, 100% cotton, and it is cold press. I am going to saturate it with water. I use the large rod and Ranson hake for this. I think eventually I might I have a spray bottle in the other room that we picked up at the dollar store that I could probably use to wet this paper as well. So painting wise, I usually, if you watch this channel long enough, you'll realize that a lot of this stuff is not planned out at all, and it's usually spur of the moment. For example, 2 days ago, I sat down just to do a painting in my normal style, but quickly switched to the idea of doing a Western watercolor, using Western watercolor tools to do an Oriental style painting and explore that. But today, sitting down, my goal is just painting in my normal style, painting in maybe like a gothic type forest. I think it'll be it's spooky, interesting, moody. That's something that I like to do. I will probably just work from back to front technique, but we'll see how that goes. So palette wise, I am thinking I might focus on phthalo blue. Reason being is that for some reason I have a video up on YouTube where I had focused on phthalo blue and mixing with it, and it has like 13,000 views, and I'm really not sure if that's just showing up as like a suggested video for people or what, but I'm just like really amazed and really excited that that's happening. And I'm not so much like painting with phthalo blue to piggyback off of that one, but more so because looking at it reminds me of my past experiments. And I was like, you know what? It's pretty fun. I have a phthalo blue that's been sitting on my palette for well over a year now in this corner. A little bit goes a long way. It was in a Van Gogh brand tube, and the Van Gogh brand tube had torn. Not the brand's fault, it's my fault, because it's kind of stuck and I twisted, and whenever you twist, it can put a lot of pressure on that metal and break it. But one tube of phthalo goes a long way, and mixing with it, here's some very interesting darks. It's kind of one of my secondary blues, where ultramarine is usually what I rely on. And you get granulation, and you get some interesting grays and darks when you mix it with earth tones. The ultramarine, the phthalo blue, you can start letting it push towards a little bit of a dark earthy greens when you mix it with earth colors. Why that happens, I'm not sure. So, that being said, we'll open up the door for one of the cats to come in who's scratching at the door. You gonna come in, Haynes? No? Or am I gonna go play? I have the laundry running in the other room, so I don't want that to be like a background noise on the video. Okay. Uh-oh, sorry, I flipped the camera. That's the bad thing about live streaming with Twitch and using the phone, is that it will adjust itself like that if it gets knocked. It'll flip itself upside down. All right, just adding another coat of water. This is my whole talking spiel. Letting it dry off. And a lot of people have been asking about how I keep the palette wet, the paper wet. So we'll try to keep that in mind as we go through this. So I'll take my normal approach. Grab some raw sienna. And I'll kind of use that to mark out how I want this landscape to play. I don't really draw anything in before. I don't draw in at all beforehand. I think that this just is how I go about doing it. I kind of mark it out. I've learned that with watercolor, you can erase with watercolor. You can remove, you can use your paper towel, you can go over it. It really does have a lot of different properties that people usually think that watercolor does not have. Raw sienna in the sky, and then I'll switch over to a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm going to put the water here so y'all can see how I wet it. I'm just putting the corner tip in just to grab some water. We do want to be careful of the cauliflower effect. That's what happens when you have a lot of water on the brush compared to the water on the paper. So if you have more water on the brush than on the paper, you'll start getting that effect. Most of this blue sky won't show up at the end, but I find when I'm doing an imaginary scene, it really does allow me to create an imaginary world by working back to front. I paint to the edges. I do that for a few reasons. This would fit underneath an 11 by 14 mat, which is probably 10 5/8 of an inch by 13 5/8. So it would cover a little bit of the border, but this kind of gives you a little bit leeway with where the mat sits, as well as not having the white on the side, which could probably throw you off tonal wise. Okay. Now, like I said, I'm going to build my way back to front. I think I'm going for like that dark Gothic vibe, but we'll see. This is light red oxide and ultramarine mix. I'm going to bring that palette closer so you can see my mixing a little bit. This gives you a dark, not a dark, it gives you a purple, which helps recede into the picture plane comparatively to other things. So my two focuses when I make up an imaginary landscape is to follow aerial perspective, where everything in the back is going to push to a bluer, purpler, or just kind of grayer side of things. And then as we come closer, things get redder than yellow, and then have that green aspect where you can warm your way up as you move forward. Reason being, what is happening is that we have layers of air between us and what we're looking at, and within that air there can be moisture, there can be air is a mixture of oxygen, and I think there's like nitrogen and other stuff in there in the air. I'm not really sure, but those little layers eventually act as kind of a screen between you and that object, and it kind of creates that color effect, the changing color effect. And do this experiment when you're driving down the road carefully, and look at a far distant object and see how it kind of grays and how it lightens up. And you'll see what I'm talking about. We do it more pronounced in paintings because it really helps things set up. Here's a little bit of Payne's gray. You see how that dark kind of makes it pop closer to us. The Payne's gray does lighten up as it dries, but you do want to be careful of where it is sitting. I'm going to have the stream pass through here, just a common S-shape composition. And I like to, just personal preference, to take Payne's gray and feed it wet and wet along the edges of the stream. For me, that's just kind of a go-to recipe. You will find your own recipes and what works for you. I have quoted a artist in the past. I don't remember the artist that I can attribute it to, unfortunately. But he says the problem with recipes is that there's different brands, different ratios, different things taking place. So like my ultramarine, the light red oxide mixed in the background, you can follow along with that, but you don't know what percent mixture I used. And then from that point, you don't know what brand I used unless I specifically say it every time. So you're going to get different outcomes. You're going to experiment and get your own results. And just keep that in mind. Actually, now would be a great time to say, as always, you guys are welcome to follow along with any one of these tutorials. You're more than welcome to sign your name to it and sell it. You have my express permission to sell anything you do that you have done following one of my paintings, one of my tutorials. Because I want you guys to succeed. Art supplies are expensive, and it really, I think, helps build confidence to sell painting, and that's part of your journey to developing your own style. So, like I said, you are more than welcome. I'm taking the rigger. This is just a mixture of that light red oxide and the ultramarine. I'm just playing around with far background. These guys ultimately won't really show through at the end, like I had said earlier. However, if just one of these shows through, it helps create a better sense of depth, and it also helps me make this imaginary landscape seem real to me. I'm just kind of sponging it in as if there was foliage on these guys. One thing to be aware of is that things do start drying as we go along. Here's some burnt umber. I'm going to feed that in here. I'm going to put some extra water into it to kind of allow this area to stay wetter. By the way, for those of you wondering, this is a Ranson hake brush, once again, which is made by Pro Art, and it's kind of a pre-worn hake. Things are looking pretty warm with this, so I'm going to soften that further one back by just dabbing with a paper towel. This does remove moisture as well, so that does affect the water retention of the paper. Now, I could always take a spray bottle and spray into it. That will kind of affect some texture. So I'll just use that to respray everything. I don't usually do that, but for this, that'll help. I'm still in the background. I'm going to mix a dark with burnt umber and ultramarine. I know that I said I'd use phthalo blue. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. One possible way to kind of look at the two colors, because you really don't want to mess with too many different colors, especially when you're just starting out, because they can you could spend too much time thinking, okay, do I use this yellow, do I use this, how do I use this, etc. And it's better just to work on perspective, both linear and aerial perspective, in conjunction with focusing on tonal values. So that being said, my little recipe, and I was talking about recipes before, is that I can use ultramarine blue further back in the painting and get my grays. And then as I come closer, I could switch over to a phthalo blue mixture, which would give me more of that foresty color with the other colors. Water concentration, I'm going wet and wet. I just have to be careful of cauliflower effects. And once again, to prevent that, you use less water on the brush than there is on the paper, and that will help you out. We're not really getting the gothic vibe that I was going for to start out with, so I don't know if it'll turn into a dark and moody painting. Right now, everything is pretty cheerful, I would say. And linear perspective wise, these guys are lower in the plane than that background, and that helps them appear closer. So I lowered where they go and I made them larger in size in comparison to the background, and that just starts creating depth to the scene. It's always good to treat water as a horizontal surface. Horizontal marks will help create it as a horizontal plane. I have a little bit of lemon yellow mix. This lemon yellow helps this foreground pop forward more. If I did put this lemon yellow in the background, I would want to put it in a thin strip, things closer. So if the same color appears in a picture, and I'm not working from a picture, but if that same color did appear here and back here, I'd want a thicker strip of it here and a thin strip back there, and that would help create a sense of depth. But you want to be careful about having the same exact color in a foreground and background. Let's get a little phthalo blue going. You'll see on the screen how I always call it like a mentholated type green or blue. To me, pure phthalo blue, I don't think I would ever put it on a can. I don't think I've ever used it pure. It's just I think some colors will kind of jive with you and work with you, and other colors may not, and that's your own personal preference and style. But you can see how we're getting a darker mix than we had just before with the burnt umber and Payne's gray. So I'm allowing this one to sit closer in the picture plane, lowering it a little bit, making it a little bit bigger. And what I'm doing now is closing off the size of the painting. So I'm putting these darker spots to act as a framing device. If you look at the paintings of the landscape masters of the 1800s, you'll see that it was very common for them to have foliage that seems to come off to the side and will extend to the side. It stops the eye from going out, but it also gives the illusion that this is just part of a small scene taking place. We can, of course, take a rigger, and I'm going to mix some Payne's gray into this mix. Just to start now, adding branches. We're still wet and wet, so it's still going to soften up, which is fine. I'm flattening my paper right here, flatten my paper right there. Darker concentration for some foliage right here, and I'll connect trees to that. Trunks in a moment. Just bringing this horizontal stroke, like I talked about earlier. Kind of think about water horizontally. That's a great tip that I picked up from, is it Eric Koppel? Eric Koppel, Koeppel. I think that's his spelling. Look him up on Facebook or on Google. He is a modern master. And when I say master, I mean it in the complete and utter sense of him being a master. He uses the techniques and style of the Hudson River Valley Masters, which were American painters in the 1800s, and it was a realistic style of painting where the brush strokes were often hidden, and it was very grandiose and beautiful scenes that were meant to accentuate both the beauty and the wilderness of America. And that same style was essentially being used, I think, in Europe. And then everything started going towards Impressionism and tonalism, where brush strokes were seen. It was different play on light, etc. So you can see how we're getting a little bit of green aspect with these guys. My next layer of trees, I'm just going to get more of a stronger dark concentration. So I'm pulling burnt umber and that phthalo blue. And now bring some guys closer here. So you see how I'm starting them lower in the picture plane. Hopefully that's showing up well. My hand might be in the way. Lower in the picture plane. Still wet and wet. Giving them a kind of a ridge to sit along that helps ground them in place. And that's a kind of a little good method if you want to just help keep yourself organized. I'm not going to carry this line directly over. I'm going to bring it down to here. piece of cat hair. Dang it. If somebody has a tool that's good for removing brush hair or cat hair from a painting, let me know, because you can probably make millions off of that. Foreground wise, something I haven't talked about in a while, and this is my observation. Whether it's true or not, I really don't know, but I'll share with you my observation. That we're often told, if you follow any art book or painting book, they often say, don't overwork the foreground, don't put so much detail in it. That prevents the eye from going into the plane. Now, looking at the masters that I mentioned, I often find that that's not the case. There's often a lot of detail in the foreground. However, my eye doesn't get trapped there. And I genuinely think that it's not so much a restriction on detail in the foreground, it's a restriction on tonal variety, where everything in this foreground is pretty dark. There's a lot of texture in there, but that darkness is helping get everything to flow together. So whether that makes sense or not, I'm not quite sure, but hopefully it just gets you thinking. Or if you have an opinion on it, let me know in the comments below. Oh, thank you so much. So like I said, I'm filming this live, and somebody's in the chat. It's Miss Sana. I know who you are, IRL. But I took off work today. I had a fever the past 2 nights. I think it's that bug that's gone around. I'm not sure if it's the same one that y'all had gotten, but I had 3 blankets on last night, and I had the chills. It's definitely not COVID, since I had that 2 or 3 months ago. But yeah, these paintings come together really quickly. And one of the reasons I live stream is that it causes me to slow down a little bit. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it causes me to slow down a little bit and kind of really play with stuff. And if there's something that you would like to see, or you say, hey, I think a tree would be interesting in this spot, or what can you do here and here, let me know, and I'll incorporate that into the painting. These areas are starting to dry some, so we can get more of a textured effect with that hake. We can also take the card and scrape out some highlights and get some different textures going in that region. You could also scrape onto the actual branch itself and give it a texture as well. And this texture will contrast with the background, which we did wet and wet, where it was nice and soft. So the background flows together, and then this technique will help pull these guys forward. And like I said earlier, I like to kind of frame off my sides. So it's just a little framing device right there. While it's wet, you can add texture with a card just simply by scraping it in. And there's various textures you can get. You could use a sharp pointed edge to get your thin lines, but you have to be careful. It very easily backfills with paint and becomes a dark spot there. You could use a rounded edge to kind of thicken it up and get a variety in your marks. You could also use the flat if you want to start bringing out rocks. And it's just very easy technique that anybody can utilize. Let's throw a little bit of Payne's gray on these sides. You can use the splayed hake for grass texture. At this point, my hake is pretty dry. If I was to go in my hand, you could see how dry it is. But you really don't want to add too much water. Like literally just the corner, you can see how much water that changes right there. And that's just a little bit, just so I can pull up some lemon yellow. In fact, if you could see my palette, you'll see how wet just the corner of the hake brought it. So if you use a paper towel, that'll help. It's very easy to overwork the foreground, and that's something I am guilty of, but it is fun. It's more pure lemon yellow in there. Now I'm going to work on my closest trees, which I'll switch to a number 4 rigger. It just makes, there's just a visual comparison between the two riggers, so you can see the thickness, a 1 and a 4. It makes putting down thicker trunks easier. So I'm grabbing a phthalo blue and burnt umber, and you can mark out ideas for where you want to put the tree. You can also listen to one of the cats playing around back there. It's Percy. She keeps on going back behind there and makes all that noise. Yeah, I was talking about you. Oh, it was Harrison. Since we're still wet down here, you bring your reflections down. Reflections, don't worry, don't let them be perfect or anything like that. Just vaguely reminiscent. You can make them perfect if you want, but one of the reasons there was a shift away from realism to tonalism and Impressionism, the Barbizon movement in France, the all those movements, pointillism, all that other stuff, was that as the camera was being developed and becoming more prominent, and they were looking for different ways to represent nature through painting, there was also, like I said earlier, the Hudson River Valley movement. There was the realism out of Germany and all those areas. And oftentimes an art movement is a reaction to a previous art movement, either building upon it or going against the grain. It's also sometimes just a reaction to what's happening in society, etc. And I think some art movements even show why society went a certain direction. one thing I always think about is, and I don't remember where I had heard it, was I think of the Rococo movement out of France, which was very gaudy and playful, while at the same time you have poor people in the streets of France. And I think them seeing that gaudiness and playfulness in painting while they're living in squalor was one of the reasons, a great example of why they had rose up, and there was the French Revolution and whatnot. And then you think about all the painters during that time period that then started painting the everyday man and people in poverty and whatnot. And who was it? It was Goya that did a lot of that. Just using this darker mix now. I'm gonna put these branches in, put breaks between them, and I'll fill them in with foliage. Harrison, how do you keep getting back there? Grab some lemon yellow. A little bit more of that lemon yellow greeny texture down here. So a mixture of phthalo blue and burnt umber is what I'm using for this extreme dark. And if you have a light enough hand, you can get thinner lines with the number 4. I'm not super light with it, but coincidentally having this palette right here, I could rest my hand on it. And at any point you could switch back to the number 1 rigger as well. Pulled out the number 4 just because of the its ability to just hold more pigment and water. It's the same brand, it's the Silver Black Velvet. And I'm not quite sure if it's a mixture of synthetic and pure squirrel or if it's just pure squirrel. Putting some darker sides around those rocks that we had scraped in. They're more for demonstration purposes, but I'll let them stay within it. I'll even bring over texture here. You can even get lily pads and pond scum. So I'll wash that out good. Try to get a lot of lemon yellow on here. There we go. Just a little dotting effect for lily pads, pond scum. Down here in Louisiana, we call it the duckweed. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it's because ducks eat it or what. I add a little more overhang to this foliage. With the hake, be careful of repeated patterns taking place. You don't want it to seem like a stamp effect, so twirl your hake around, use the side, use the flat side, and that'll prevent if looking like a stamp effect. I do want a secondary dark on the right. I'll let him come up and go off the page. We could always put stuff that starts hanging over in front, but I think that would be a little excessive. Oh, another cat here. I'm just using a razor blade to flick it out. Might just stay there. I need to update my Etsy. Sorry, I know that was random. Just thinking about now I'll have all this free time. Sienna knows what I'm talking about if she's still there. Now that I have all this free time, I could start posting a lot more on the Etsy and whatnot. But the cool thing is, I'm not really one who believes in, like, you know, not really superstitious or anything like that. But yeah, you're planning on upping your stream output as well. Yeah, a lot more free time now, right? You know, it's weird. March 13th of 2020 is when our state went into lockdown for COVID, and everybody was sent home from work and whatnot. And March 13th of this year was when my channel finally reached 2,000 subscribers. And then that was like a huge kickoff point for then suddenly getting just a large influx of subscribers on YouTube. I think at this point, within 2 weeks, I had 600 new subscribers. So a year ago, March 13th, everything shut down. A year later, I finally hit, like to the day, 2,000 subscribers. Because that's when I really started going into stream mode and YouTube mode. And then from there, it's been coming along really nicely. You know, I'll scroll through like Facebook or something like that, or Instagram, and I'll see a painting and I'll be like, wait, that's my painting. And it's not, it's something that somebody had copied from a tutorial of mine. And then it'll say in the text or something like that, it'll say in the style of Andrew Broussard or tagging me in it, which is really cool. And I always give that disclaimer of, you're more than welcome to follow along with any of these tutorials. And you're more than welcome to sell any of art that you do following one of these tutorials. And I think people really appreciate that. I think that's really been coming along nicely. I'm going to try to put a little branch here. So I saw for your stream you were talking about doing a karaoke night or something. I think that would be pretty fun. Just playing with a little bit of ground foliage. That is where I think streaming really helps me, is that I put little extra details. Even though it's a fast and loose painting, and like you said, it came together really quick, I then am able to spend a few extra minutes doing this. That's really cool. I don't know if somebody watches a live stream, if the chat then shows up at a later date, you know what I mean? Like, this will stay up on Twitch for a few days, and then somebody might watch it. I don't know if the chat text does that, but if you ever want to, Sina, if you want to post any links or anything in the chat, for people to see at a later date, you're more than welcome. Because I think it's just me and you right now, I think, in here. Sort of take the same color. I have it all over the back of my hand. That's where I start smearing stuff. It does show up, but yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, so if it does show up, go for it. And share away, because she is a very talented singer, and y'all really need to hear her sing. Let's see. I'm trying to think of where I want to go with this one. I will start wrapping it up soon. Just looking to see if there's any little finishing touches that need to take place. We could grab a little bit of lavender. Oh, that's cool, thank you. All right, so yeah, so you're streaming tomorrow night. I'll try to pop by after work. I'll go tutor, but I don't think I'll be out that late. And my fiance, she'll be out babysitting, but I should be home. Just hopefully I get the notification. I'm taking a little bit of lavender here, which is by Van Gogh brand. We'll see if that kind of gives a little pop to it, kind of just a little bit of wildflower there. This lavender, I know it's a mixture of white and I don't know what other color, but that's usually, especially I think with most brands and cheaper brands, is that to achieve colors like this, they'll use white and another pigment. Kind of like how some brands do cobalt blue or cerulean blue as white with phthalo blue. I could always grab some lemon yellow and put that in amongst this lavender. So we get a little bit of mixture of wildflower. And then stuff like this will help establish what time of year a painting is in. And I could probably add a little bit of stronger yellow to these little lily pads. To give them a little bit more depth. I just think that they sit horizontally on top of that water. So I'm doing horizontal marks with them. Okay. Do we want to build a snowman? Do we want to put a bird right here? Okay, Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber. This is the #1 rigger. I don't know if I have anything tinier than this. I might have to switch over. And I need to support this hand. Do a body of a bird. Here's the bird's body. The head and the beak go in an opposite, different direction than the body travels in. and then from there we'll splay out its tails. That maybe it'd be a little too long, but I can lift that up. There we go, he's got a longer beak. So a little bird on the end. Yeah, definitely birds. Yeah, put the little guy sitting there. That's always a good time to grab, like, I think it was, I don't know if it was John Singer Sargent or Constable. They would always put a splash of red somewhere in a painting, like a small little bit. And I have vermilion, which it's not pure vermilion. And if you don't have vermilion, you can use light red oxide or cadmium red light. Let's put a bird up in here. So there's the body. The tail coming out. We'll switch over to Payne's Gray for the beak and the feet. I'm not going to really connect them to the body because it'll spread out. It's just kind of giving the idea. And there you go, there's the head of the bird. And looking up close, it doesn't quite resemble a bird, but it does help when you're looking at a distance. In fact, we'll do one flying. All right, let me move my palette out the way. Let me do a quick dry off. So I'm going to use a blow dryer. So if you have earbuds on, watch your ears. Dry enough for our purposes. I'm going to sign the painting and then I'll put a mat over it for you all to see what it looks like, and then we'll call the painting at that. Guys, the cats are meowing up a storm. Let me make sure they're not like... Guys, you're just standing there acting like you're dying. Cats are so dramatic. So here it is with a mat over it. So you can kind of see what it would look like if it was framed. Doesn't sit flat perfectly. But there you go. So on that note, yeah, look to the cats, yep. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll talk to you all soon. Thank you guys for watching and follow along. Of course, please like, subscribe, follow, and thank you so much for the great compliment. You all take care. And remember, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, Sina will be going live on her channel. Y'all take care.